So guys, I'm here at the Ecno Lodge, which is, kind of like a hooker motel. I'm not getting, some hookers here, but my brother's kind of a noisy bastard, so, he's gonna be home for a couple of days. I need to get some rest. I need to review AEW Grand Slam Australia for you guys without any interruptions. Maybe my brother would like to come here because he sure does love his hookers. Comedy aside, this video is called AEW Grand Slam Safe Not Sorry. And there were a bunch of people reviewing the show, and I do agree with what other people are saying, which is that the show was definitely very, very predictable. And also, it's the typical AEW format, which is an overemphasis on matches, not really emphasis on stories. And I really think that they need to make a decision for next year. Should AEW Grand Slam Australia actually be a pay-per-view? And I think that it should. And also, can they understand that it needs to be a part one, AEW Grand Slam Australia, and then the part two is Revolution? Like, you need to build to this pay-per-view, the Grand Slam show, and then you need to kind of build to the Revolution show, because I think that's the way to do it. The other issue with this show is that they have between 6,000 and 7,000 people, and this was a 20,000 seat arena, so it's 33% full, and that's not good. And they also said that there's a lot of very poor advertisement of the show, so this could have been easily maybe a close to 10,000 show, but obviously, as I said, that this is obviously not good when you have a 33% full arena. Like, they have to work way, way harder on treating the Australia shows like a big deal. It's either you go all in, or you either go all in or you shut the fuck up, really. So I'm going to talk about the matches in the order that I like them. So my favorite match of the night was Brody King versus MJF. There are a lot of really great things about this match, that they both did their offense. They both did a really great job of just countering. It went for a while. The other thing, too, was that I really like MJF, because what happened was there was a bunch of fuck ice chants. So what MJF did was that he decided not to fight Brody King. He went out into the arena. It looked like he was about to leave the arena. And then the crowd started booing him. And he did some spots where he's afraid of Brody King's strength. But he was playing a jerk character very well, really. So he kind of was almost like saying, you know what, I got to rile the crowd enough so they're not saying fuck ice, they're saying fuck MJF. So that is a sign of a great professional wrestler. If Ric Flair was wrestling in Ric Flair wrestled in the 1970s. So if people were chanting, hell no, we won't go to Vietnam, it would be Ric Flair's job to say, hey, you know what, you're not going to be talking about political issues. I'm going to rise to the occasion, so you start putting your attention on me. And that's what he did, really. Obviously, Brody King lost. So it's definitely another thing, too, where a lot of people are upset by this because, he's very over in the company. We don't know his direction. He and Bandito could become a tag team again. He could be off television for a couple of months because it's like, okay, we got to kill down these chants. Or he could be just having random matches on the roster, really. So I really think that, you got to kind of ask yourself, what is going to happen with Brody King this year. I think that he should have a series of matches, and they should put him in the Owen Hart tournament. And if he's really over, you have to give Will Ospreay another year you have to kind of give him another year waiting around, really. Or you can kind of do something like you can have them have a match, Brody King loses, and Ospreay says, hey, once I'm the champion, at the first match that I'm going to have on American soil, where I defend this title on American soil, is going to be you and me. We're going to have a rematch. So there's ways to kind of make sure that Brody King doesn't become irrelevant. And then some people were saying, too, that they didn't like how Hangman Adam Page came out after this because he won his match between Andrade. And they were kind of saying that they're going to actually have a sit-down on television, MJF and Hangman. So why are you having Hangman come down at the very end? It doesn't really make any sense because it also takes away from the moment. Just like they were talking about Bound for Glory last year when Mike Santana won, he was celebrating with his daughter, and then they did like a tease of a call your shot cash in. That sometimes you got to think about, okay, you know what, once you put the cherry on top of the ice cream, that's it, really. Don't do something like say, okay, we're going to give you a tour of the ice cream factory after that. You got to kind of say, what's the final thing out of this? The next match I really like was Kyle Fletcher versus Mark Briscoe. There are a lot of really sick spots where Kyle Fletcher does a moonsault off the ladder onto Mark Briscoe. There's some people who just didn't like that spot because they said like Mark Briscoe almost broke his neck. The other issue about this is that they also did a brain buster off the top ladder, so Mark Briscoe went down, and it was definitely very epic. It was a very brutal match, and I was kind of saying to myself, I kind of wonder what's going to happen next with the TNT Championship. And I do agree with what Russell Toddy was saying, that I think that we're at the point with Kyle Fletcher where he really seriously needs to be in the heavyweight championship picture. Like, they can honestly do some of the Don Callis family. Like, they really need to get rid of Takeshita, Kyle Fletcher, and Andrade. Like, I think that they can all be single stars because they lack a single star division. So I think that they need to kind of get them all kicked out of the Don Callis family. And I think that would be very, very helpful. Even if you do Anarchy Arena, like Team Takeshita versus Team Don Callis or something like that. But there has to be a certain point, in my opinion, that I think that the people who are baby faces in Don Callis family have to separate. And you can do a storyline with that. And also, too, you got to say, hey, there might be some people, you can do a storyline where Don Callis is really arrogant. Like, the way that I would do it is that I have Kyle... what I would do is that I would have Kyle Fletcher versus Tommaso Ciampa at AEW Revolution, because Ciampa deserves a rematch. And then what you do is that Mark Briscoe comes out and he kind of says, hey, you know what, me and Ciampa, like when I was a champion, Ciampa didn't give me a rematch. So, and then Don Callis says something like, hey, you know what, Kyle, let's show how dominant you are, really. So yes, it'll be one more time. You're going to face Mark Briscoe, but you're going to face Ciampa, and whoever wins is a TNT champion. Nobody else can face the champion as long as they're a champion, like something like that, really. Because then that way you have Kyle Fletcher getting pissed off with Don Callis about saying you got to go one more time with Mark Briscoe. So that could lead to something. So I think that'd be a good thing. But overall, it's a really great match. But I understand, but I'm always kind of wondering, like, what's the epilogue? What's going to happen after this? The next match was Konosuke Takeshita versus Jon Moxley. And I like what the announcers are saying. This Takeshita doesn't fit in the Don Callis family, and he feels really dragged in there. So they're kind of foreshadowing, maybe a switch, really. But I really think that we need to kind of get to Takeshita versus Okada. Even if you want to do a 60-minute match or you want to do something with that. But there has to be a sense of, okay, this has been simmering for, I think almost like 6 months, really. So you have to get to a point of saying, let's get to it. Like, overall, the match is really good. I wish there was a lot more, like, Will Ospreay athletic type of stuff, really. But they had a really great match. I was not happy with them going to 20 minutes because... first of all, not a lot of people remember the rules of the Continental Classic, so they have to say, okay, when it's the Continental Classic belt is on the line, you have 20 minutes, and then nobody's allowed to interfere on ringside, and then also you have an hour at a pay-per-view. So they really should have kind of explained that, because I think a lot of people don't know those rules. So I don't really like it when they do countdown matches without announcing that they're countdown or explaining why there is a countdown, or making a story, or even have the graphic showing the 20-minute countdown. So, but it's also very, very predictable, because I do feel that once again, as I said, the predictable thing is to keep it on Jon Moxley, or to do Takeshita versus Okada, title versus title, really. But I think it was just, a way for them to have an exhibition match so they can have one more match at Revolution, and then after that they can probably do Takeshita and Okada at Dynasty. The next thing is that you had the Mega Bad versus the Grapes of the Mega Bad versus the Babes of Wrath. It was an all right match. There was nothing that really stood out to me. They had this woman named Lana Cross, and she joins the Mega Bad team. So I think they need to get rid of Penelope Ford, because she's a smaller person, really. So I really don't like the big girl and the small girl dynamic, really, because it's just like we've seen a lot of old cartoons, really, where you have the big strong lackey and the smaller person. So I really think they need to be like, hey, you know what, we actually need to just we actually really just need to do something like like just how to like if it's Megan Bayne and Maria Shafir, keep it like that. If it's Megan Bayne and this new girl Lena Cross, then you got to keep it like that. You just don't do something like say, hey, you know what, we're gonna bring Penelope Ford or whatever really. So I really think that needs to be the direction really. But overall, it's an okay match, and I'm not sure what they're gonna do with Willow because she's the TBS champion. So I kind of wonder, again, like what's kind of like, are they going to build a story with the TBS women's title? Would one of the maybe Triangle Madness members go after her? Like, what's the next step with this? Or does Tekla want to say, hey, what we're going to take, we're going to like, we already took the title of Statlander, we're going to take everything away from the Babies Rap, we're going to hold all the women's championships. That would kind of make a lot of sense that you might do Mercedes versus Tekla or something like that. The next match was Hangman versus Andrade. Andrade is the Spanish Fly. They're both very athletic people. As I call it, this is ARW, all repeat wrestling. Hangman's going to win. They don't want to take a risk with Andrade, even though, let's try to push a little different people, really, because otherwise it feels like WWE when you had over 100 John Cena versus Randy Orton matches. So it's ARW, all repeat wrestling. And then they had the Tornado tag team match between Wheeler Yuta, Maria Shafir versus Tony Storm and Orange Cassidy, really. So a lot of people were saying too, there's a lot of like there was like a lot of man on woman violence in this, and I don't really mind that. They're trying to show that they're all epic people, but Wheeler Yuta loses. He gets his head shaved. And I agree with what some people were saying, that when you look at WWE, when Vince McMahon got his head shaved, they did it all the way. Or even when you looked at some other matches in TNA wrestling, people got their head shaved all the way, really. But Wheeler Yuta, he got maybe a 30%, maybe not less than 30% shave, really. They could have done a lot more. They kind of sent him out with a bad haircut, but they should have done the whole thing, because that makes a lot more sense. The interesting thing is that when Wheeler Yuta wanted to get out of Dodge, when he was like, fuck this, really, Jon Moxley set him back in there. And I appreciate that for two reasons, because obviously you can do a match between Jon Moxley and Wheeler Yuta about this. Like he's like saying, hey, you know what? You're being the good guy and the bad guy, Jon Moxley. Hey, you know what, wouldn't the thing that you should just let me go, because we're not about doing the right thing, really. And then Jon Moxley could say something like, even though there's sometimes there's no honor among thieves, but sometimes thieves got to have honor or something like that. There could be something out of this, or why would Jon Moxley force him to do this? But there could be a storyline that you can lead to Jon Moxley versus Wheeler Yuta Continental Classic match. I think that would be good, because then you can kind of set up the dissension of the Death Riders this way. That kind of makes a lot of sense, really. But yeah, it's fun to see Wheeler Yuta get shaved. But as I said, they should have done the whole thing. They should have done the beard. They should have done everything, really. But not just, okay, we're gonna maybe they got 5% of him, but they didn't get all of him, really. But overall, it was an okay show. I appreciate them having a lot of improvements from last year. They went from a 50,000 seat arena to maybe I think a 10,000 seat. And then also what they did last year was that they changed from a pay-per-view to a Collision special. And then also they kind of lied about that, So I think this year was less controversial. But they really have to say to themselves, if they want Australia to matter, they have to market it better. They have to build a bigger and stronger card. They have to be okay, we need to follow up from Australia to the Revolution show. And that's not that hard to do, because WWE does pay-per-views every month. You can also say to yourself, hey, look at TNA Wrestling. I think they had Genesis in January. Last night they had No Surrender, and a lot of the No Surrender matches look like they're things thrown together. I think AEW can afford to do more pay-per-views and have more storylines and make more money that way. But I don't think that they should. I think that, as I said, I think their effort was way better. They set up a lot of really great matches for this show. They cared a lot more. The Brody King squashing MJF was a very brave statement. So there was definitely a lot of improvements But I do think that obviously they need to do way better. Australia, you have to ask yourself, does Australia matter to AEW? And if it matters to them, they have to make it matter more and more and get to the point where this becomes a February pay-per-view.